Hi, Lindsay. So I looked over your lesson plan and here's some feedback for you. This lesson plan is fantastic, super fantastic. Your scaffolding is great. Your direct instruction is great. I love the back and forth that you establish between giving direct instruction, showing example, asking a question. You just have this really nice kind of like rhythm where you do instruction, example, question, instruction, example, question. And that is so nice for students because when we set up those kinds of rhythms, well, it's like rhythm in a song, right? You hear that rhythm and instantly everything comes back to you. And when you have that kind of a flow and a rhythm in your class, it does the same thing to their brains. They're like, oh, think, read, question, think, read, question. It's beautiful. There's one place where I want to push you a little further with some questions, and I'll show you where that is later on, as we get into lesson plan, okay? So I love the fact that you have all this information filled out, nice and complete. You've chosen the perfect goal, looking at points of view, and you've perfect alignment in that, okay? I like your global, essential, and content area questions, and I think your students will be able to is nicely written. Very straightforward, student-friendly speak, so when the kids come in the room, they know exactly what they're focusing on today and how to produce that work for you. All right. So let's get into the learning plan, okay? So we saw your hook in class the other day, and that was really cool way to point out point of view. I liked that a lot. And right in here was the only area where I thought, like as I was first reading your lesson plan, I thought, gosh, she could probably get a little bit more audience involvement, more kids' voices in here. But after reading the rest of your lesson plan, I'm like, wow, you do that for the rest of the class. And so, so it would be, I don't know, it's a thought that I have here, something to think about, but not like, oh my gosh, you have to do this because the whole lesson is direct instruction. It's not like that. But let me share my thought with you nonetheless, okay? So you say, in literature, authors use point of view to show the reader how a character thinks or feels about the situations in a story. Point of view allows the reader to see and hear what's happening in the story. Understanding is beneficial because it'll help us understand literature better. The thing is that it's like 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of long bullet points of you just talking at the kids. If you could even move a tiny bit of that information, of this information down farther in the lesson plan so that you just said like, oh, so you're looking at different points of view when you focus on the black versus focusing on the white. So point of view is a place of focus, right? People can do this in writing too. This bullet point right here. Then push these 2 bullet points to a little bit later in the lesson because it almost becomes a beautiful formative assessment for you. Let me show you. So keep these bullet points in mind and let me show you where you could drop those in, okay? You move into direct instruction, and this is the part where I love that rhythmic flow that you have, right? Take out your notes. I'm going to ask you to write down these 3 things. Super straightforward instruction. Kids know what they can be doing, and that's that really nice piece, Lindsay, I was talking about before that'll help you with classroom management too. So if kids are zoning out, screwing around, you can just say, what should you be doing? And when I don't know, okay, it's take out your notes, words, definition, example, here we go. And it's so easy to put them back on track without being condescending, So here we go. Question, answer, follow up, right? Question, answer, follow up. And I love this back and forth. And the fact that you're providing examples as you go, instead of like all direct instruction, all examples. You've got this flow back and forth. We can tell it's a first-person narrator because we use I or we. Look at this example. And then you repeat that information. So it's really beautiful because you demonstrate, they write. You give them clues, they look at an example, you reiterate the clues. Lindsay, I can't tell you. This is phenomenal. This is beautiful. I love it, I love it, I love it. So you keep going with that flow right here. I think the sentences that you pull are great. I love the fact, right, you push forward into the limited and the omniscient, and you've got all those pieces, and I love the fact that you push forward into looking at a common misconception, because it shows that you're thinking about kids' point of view, right? What happens when you have I? That can be tricky because it's inside of quotes. I mean, it shows me that you're not just using your teacher brain, but you're using that Doug Lemov double planning too, where you go, okay, where's the potential misunderstanding kids can come up with? Dialogue, duh. Beautiful, beautiful. So it's right here, you get done talking about dialogue, here, right here, before you get into the model, bear with me while I scroll, that I want you to think about the power of wrapping back around. Remember we talked about that spiraled information, right? You've got this beautiful set here. Point of view is how you look at things. You can do it with pictures, you can do it with writing. Let's look at the points of view. You know, really beautiful rhythm. Ba, 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 ba. Now, put a pretty bow on the end by saying to them, so, can you see the point of view allows the reader to see and hear what's happening in the story? What do you guys think? How does understanding point of view help us understand literature better? I'll give you a minute to talk to your partner and think about that, right? Look at the beauty of sinking that information in with this higher order question, because you've done, right, identification, recognition, application in these tiny little chunks, tiny little sentences. Now that you've done that, how about evaluation of skill by looking at, we've done these tiny bits of application. You guys totally get this stuff. So what? How's that going to help us understand? It takes that beautiful rhythmic thinking and just sinks it right in, because then they're like, oh, how does that help me better understand? And when they can come into that kind of a questioning area on their own and wrestle with their own answers, it sinks that learning in so much more beautifully. So I love this. We're just going to scooch it down a little bit, okay? If that doesn't make sense, ask me about it. And you know, Lindsay, because you have these components as a matter of organization, I might ask you if it's okay with you to replicate this kind of a conversation that I'm sort of having with you, except that I'm talking to my computer right now, right? Replicate it with you in class, because I think that it's a beautiful piece of just this edgy push that we can do with you that really sinks something in with students, all right? Bear with me while I scroll. Sorry, I know it can be dizzying. So I love the fact that you model that information, right? You do start that right in here. So we're doing guided practice. You move on to the modeling. You push them forward, doing that on their own with Reading Journal 2 and 3. And I super love that point of view is something that you intentionally chose, because this text switches points of view. It's not like you can teach point of view with anything, right? But what's the beauty of teaching point of view after you have them read chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you wrap back around and go, okay, guys, trick question for you here. Why do you think I taught point of view before we started reading? And your kids are going to go, oh my gosh, because she switches point of view. Right. Remember that question that I asked you back on Monday? How does point of view help us understand literature? Well, you talked to me about it in generalities. Let's talk about it. Let's specifically synthesize the generalities with this piece of literature. How does understanding point of view really help you understand this text? I mean, it is like the most beautiful scaffolding I have ever seen. I love it. So, super fantastic job. I love it. And I look forward to hearing from you if you wouldn't mind replicating this conversation in class, because I think this is really well done and it's a piece of information that can really benefit everyone in our class. Thanks, Lindsay.